Welcome to our special edition of Dance Mogul TV. We are live with world-renowned dancer Alicia Graf Mack's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Graf. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, it's such an honor to be able to sit down and speak to you guys personally. Alicia's accomplishments are so well received by the world, and we really appreciate the opportunity that you guys have extended yourselves to where you are willing to sit down and share with us and our audience as far as how you were able to come together as a family and work closely together to help assure the success of all of the members of your family. And we see that as being as outstanding and has great value. So if you will, for a moment, can you just share some information about yourselves personally?
I'm a rural person,
Okay.
and my husband's an urban person. And where I grew up, we had less than 3,000 people total. And therefore, I, for the most part, grew up in a small village where people knew each other and could almost tell you whose car was going down the road. We were a community of connected families, and most of the people there were my relatives, or they were people who we had known for generations, not people who we would call foreigners.
Okay.
It was a wonderful place because people from the outside were foreigners. So if you had come down, you would have been one of those foreigners. Not really. The point. Yeah. But at any rate, you would have been an outsider coming into our little town. But one of the wonderful things about our little town is when everybody, for the most part, were church-oriented.
Okay.
Most of us grew up literally in a community of churches. And we had spirituality as a major part of our lives, and then a love of each other and our community as an additional part of our life.
Okay.
So when we moved from one spot to another, Arnie and I, we've also moved into communities, and each time we moved, we always tried to connect so that we were a part of the community. I know all my neighbors for the most part here,
Okay.
just as I knew all the neighbors when I grew up. And everywhere we move, we've been like that. And I think that's been one of the critical parts of being a part of an urban, diverse society, is that choosing a neighborhood where you're a child or where you can be a part of it. And I think that's one of the critical things for our family that's been important.
Did you see that example from your parents? How did you come to understand that concept of community?
We were a community. If we didn't help each other in times of crisis, we wouldn't have anybody, because we didn't have, at that particular time, you must understand, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. We were so small that we didn't have let's say, an ambulance.
Okay.
If someone needed help, the next door neighbor might help.
Okay.
We had a clinic instead of a big hospital.
Yes.
And the man who owned the clinic owned the little tiny hospital upstairs, where people would go in times of need or emergency. So many of the things that you would see in huge places, we did not have there. So the people who were there, the moms and the dads, had to come together and create a life for us.
Okay.
To create the teams, the baseball teams for the boys, create the stadium, which was a part of a privately owned park, to create beautiful things, what they call the cotillion now, but many years ago we just called them debutantes. Okay. So that the debutante ball, the activities that we were a part of came from our parents working together. Okay. And in decency and respect. And because the focus was on character, you could be a man who shoveled ditches during the week and be a highly respected man within the community. You didn't have to be a president of the United States to be respected.
Okay.
It was based on how your character was in your own community, which then garnered respect for you. And I think that that was one of the critical things that we had.
Okay. Wow. What are your thoughts about community? Is that how you felt about what you saw as you were?
Well, I didn't, not in the same way as my wife. I grew up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan,
Okay.
and then Queens, and then eventually Long Island. So these were big places, and so it wasn't so much community as it was extended family.
Okay.
So I grew up in a deep, rich extended family, where weekly everyone got together.
Okay.
So we had dinner together. Maybe, I think it was about 37 of us every Friday night.
Wow.
In my grandmother's apartment, which was a 1.5 room apartment on the Lower East Side, so we just all squeezed in. And my grandmother was a person who always, even though she didn't have much, she always invited other people who she thought had less. So there was always, besides the 37 of us, another 2 or 3 people. And she always thought that, well, since she was cooking so much, she used to say, you could just take the chicken and dip it in the water some more, you know?
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 other people could, you know, have a family meal.
And that's an amazing concept, because you were able to live through the time when you guys were able to sit down as a family and as an extended family and have dinner, and you were able to see the transition of how this country started to move away from sitting down and eating as a family.
Right.
And yet, you know, you were still grounded in those values, and to where you were able to still hold on to that, to appreciate how that helped molded you.
Yeah, so that even though we came out of, you know, very different geographies and very different places, we both came from, you know, pretty strong emphasis on family and extended family.
Okay. And at what point within the community did you realize the value of education? Did you feel that in order to elevate yourself as an individual, you needed to pursue an education? Was this something that your family instilled in you? How did you see the value of education?
Education was always a part of my life from the time I was born. My mom was a teacher.
Okay.
And my dad was a farmer and an entrepreneur. We owned a place called the Rogers Grill, and my dad was a farmer for most of my life. We produced poultry for the factories, and my mom was always the one who was responsible. And since her father had been military, he had been a Korean military man, it was always drilled into us, you must go on to get a better education so that you can have a better life, whatever that meant.
Yes.
And for me, it was always, I had to get a good education because I need to be able to help my husband. I wasn't the most motivated person in the world. I like to have fun. I like being a majorette, and I like playing ball, and I like dancing.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
And I wasn't the most motivated kid. I liked to do well. And my mom would make sure that in the summer we would have enrichment programs that she would more or less sponsor with other mothers so that I never was behind. But if it had been left to me, I would have gone outside and played or played some music. But at any rate, my mother said that all of us would be going to school. We didn't have a choice. And I think your family was the same, that they had to go to school. And I think for my brothers, my mother and father literally kind of put them there. And I think for him, they literally put him there. Okay. And when I wanted to stay home, I said, I want to stay home to run the business. She said, no, you can't do that. You must go to school. I didn't have I really didn't have, you know, a choice, and I'm glad that I was given that opportunity to go on.
Yes.
It was an exciting opportunity for me because where I didn't have a lot to think about in my small little community, because if I wanted to do lots of things, I would have to go to Chapel Hill or to Raleigh or to Greensboro. But church was a foundation, and in the church we sang. I mean, I can sing.
Wow.
Right. We sang, and we went from one church to another church as youth choirs,
Okay.
and we sang and performed, and that way you met guys, you see,
Wow.
because we would try to finagle the situation
Yes.
to the point that
work.
we were going to go to this
Yes.
church where this guy was, who was
Exposure.
also in a choir.
Yes.
And so we went from one place to another to sing, and we would get that high, you know.
Yes, yes.
So that was really nice. So anyway, because of that, I was blessed with a voice. And we became little celebrities because of our voices, our ability to play ball, our ability to march in the band, and things like that. And so we had our own way of looking at things. But one of the major things was the emphasis on virginity, the emphasis on marrying, and your first husband is you will be his virgin bride, and that type of thing. And that
Okay.
was a value within the town where I grew up.
Wow.
And so we literally spent most of our time in churches.
Okay.
Most of us grew up going back to church. If we went organizations, the organizations were church related. So let's say I was the president of junior choir. I wasn't in the usher board, but I could have been. We had plays, we had recitals, we had different activities, and we had vacation Bible school in the summertime. Different activities that we were always engaged in. And then we had the daycare center, which my mom was involved in forming. So there were just lots of things to do. We had the county fair, and getting involved in that and helping to set that up over the summer was a good activity for me. So there were always activities, always things that were being developed, always situations that adults were setting up so that we as children had a chance to learn. And I think that those things helped to prepare us to go away to college.
Okay.
You know, or to go out into the bigger society and work.
I noticed that you mentioned your mom organizing the different events, and it sounds like some of the activities were arts related, and it sounds like you were exposed to the arts at a young age, and your mom may have been involved in coordinating, and she may have favored and loved the arts as well.
You know, the funny thing about it, she was an arts and crafts specialist who taught children how to use different kinds of arts and crafts. She would put art all over our house, and I said, junk everywhere. Junk. And one time I can remember going in and putting her stuff in the drawers. I don't want this junk around here. And she would make things, put them on the wall, and put $2.50. And the young couples would come through and say, I'd like one in blue, I'd like one in purple. And she would raise money for different kinds of benefits by putting this junk everywhere. But the problem was, she said, this is my house. When you have a house, you can do whatever you want in your house. But this is my house. If I want my junk on this wall, I'll put my junk on the wall. So she would go and put the junk up again. But I never saw it as art. I never saw her as an artist. And yet that was a major part of who she was.
Yes.
And now I have junk.
Yeah.
Which is the funny thing. I look up and I say, here I have junk everywhere. And so we are alike in a lot of ways.
Yes,
right?
yes. So you had the early exposure, and it was obvious that the arts is a part of your family lineage.
Right, right. I mean, from the time I was a little girl, I'm going to show this to my class. I need you to help me. I want to see how it will work. So I'm helping. The only reason she could get me to do things, I'm helping her. So I would sit down and draw the porcupine, or draw the Santa Claus, or draw the whatever, or use the materials. This is
our grandson.
other little grandson. Hi.
Yeah. Good. All right. And so as far as now, during these same times when you were coming up, what did you see as far as the arts? How was it playing out in your environment?
My parents loved music. My parents grew up relatively poor and weren't exposed to a lot. My mother did finish high school, but my father never did. He had to go out and work for the family. And so they weren't really exposed to a lot of art. But somehow my mother had an appreciation, and so she would listen to opera, which as a child I didn't care for. My father had liked jazz, so I kind of grew up with Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan,
Wow.
and Louis Armstrong, and people like that. I don't know where he acquired that taste, but so we always had music going on in the house. But I used to like when my father got to the record player before my mother did, because I never really cared for opera. And my mother loved ballet.
Wow.
And she'd have to kind of drag my father to these things. He didn't care for the ballet or for opera in particular. He wanted to listen to, Louis Armstrong or something like that. But she loved the ballet, and eventually she got my father to, he got to appreciate it. She said she went to a fortune teller one time.
Wow.
And fortune teller told you're going to have a granddaughter who's going to be a dancer. That's what she claims. And she said she used to have these dreams of Alicia, with the umbrella, for Ailey and the Wade in the Water part of Revelations. I don't know where that would ever come from.
Wow.
But that's what she...
Do you feel that, both of you guys, do you feel that a part of longevity in friendship, relationship, or marriage, that it's important to have something in common, such as an appreciation for the arts, as far as making you guys compatible in a sense? Do you think that that's important? Whether it's the arts or whatever it is, having things in common. And if it's the arts, can that help?
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, most of the time with the arts, I was paying bills and transporting. I enjoy the arts in that in the end we would go out and see the end product and could see this child who eventually got to the point that she could do turns or do whatever. I think that if I were to put the arts in the center, it gave us a life we would not have had. It exposed us to people and places we would not have seen. And it took us to a different level of awareness of the arts that we would not have necessarily been able to develop because we wouldn't have known people. And because we got to know people who are in the performing arts, we learned that many of these people are extremely bright people. They are studying and working while traveling, and they have different interests. They're writing books, they're going to school, they're trying to develop their minds and moving toward some place that they're going to be at the end of their career. And that was something that was totally amazing to me, but that was an awareness I developed by working with Dance Theater of Harlem and meeting the young people in that particular group. And when Alicia was here in school with Ballet Royale, they would have performances and we would go, and there is no feeling on this earth like the feeling you have when a child performs and people are clapping and cheering and screaming in the audience because that child did something. That's raw and it's pure and it's good. It has nothing to do with earn a living.
Yes.
It just has to do with, in this arena, in this little pond, this little child has acquired a degree of respect. And that school is pushing that talent. And that, I don't think there's anything that is more exciting than that, seeing your child perform. And I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, no, well, I think it was museums that we always had in common. So we liked going to art museums, and wherever we are, we always went to art museums, even when we were, just dating. And we'd love to go to MoMA, or if we were in New York, or just different museums.
The arts was there.
Yeah, so I think the arts were, and I even when we first met, I had prints. Couldn't afford the paintings, but I had the prints of Picasso or Modigliani or people like that I had gotten exposed to mostly because of my mother, really, who took this love of the arts and never really know where she acquired it from, but and so it was always around the house. And the music side, as I said, my love of jazz, really came from my father.
Okay. So as we fast forward a little bit from that point in you guys' life, and you guys now have children, and like you said, putting Alicia in the dance school and exposing your other children to just trying to keep them busy. Initially, did you say to yourself, did you have any specific plans for your children with the arts, or was it just, I want to put them in extracurricular activities just because it can help build them up?
When Alicia was 2, I used to use her as my weight in exercising, and that was a way of making sure I had her in my eyesight at the same time. So I would be on the floor exercising, and there was a newspaper on the floor, and she ran over and started looking at this newspaper, and it was showing the performing arts programs and movies that were coming up, and she was there, Ma, 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 and she's over there, whatever. So I said, oh my. So I was a model. I decided, all right, this is weird. And we were sitting on the floor, and I decided to start moving with her. So I started moving my hand as a model. And she sat on the floor in front of me, and she mimicked me. We kept doing that over and over and over again to the music I was listening to. And then I was reading the newspaper again, and I saw an ad that said, school has children 3 years old in ballet. So I went to that school in diapers, that's what it says, children in diapers. So I went to the school and talked to a teacher. I said, I don't know really, but I think my child is gifted. So she said, let me see your child. And I showed her my child. So this was Carly, I think her name was Carly Marks. And anyway, I showed her my child, and she said, forget about it. We'll forget about the age, just bring her. So when she was in diapers, I took her to the school. They didn't really dance. They just took ribbons and ran around the floor and did little simple things. But by the time she was 5, Carly said, she is gifted. You must find the best teachers. I am leaving. You have to find teachers. So we started trying to locate teachers. And each time, fortuitously, somebody would come and say, I want to take her to the next level. Someone would say, I've taken her as far as I can take her. Another person would come in and say, I want to take her to the next level. And even with the other child, Daisha, she was not a tiny little thing. She was big and voluptuous. As a little girl, she was full-figured. And you would look at her and say, now that's not a ballerina, that's not a dancer. And Mr. Malone said to us, let me take her. I don't know what it is, but she's got it. And where everybody thought, hey, this little girl is not a dancer, more or less, he said, let me take her. So he took this little heavy girl, and then he kept saying, go here, go there, and introduced her to quite a few different dance teachers. And as a result, she ended up going from one dance school to another dance school to another dance school and learn. And I think if not other people who could see the talent and who could say, let me take her, go here, go there, we wouldn't have known what to do. And I think we...
Yeah, and the boys, but she was I was a big believer in a lot of activity, as many activities as you could have. So the boys were always in, as well as the girls. They weren't in the arts because they weren't as interested, but they were much more interested in sports, but they were in all kinds of leagues and sports.
It offered structure. It
absolutely
gave them structure throughout
That's
the summer. And you
Right.
guys appreciated the value of that structure and keeping them engaged.
We started in the morning. We picked our children up and we went from place to place to place, dropping off and picking up. And we had a schedule, drop off, pick up, drop off, pick up. And that would continue till like 10 o'clock at night.
We only left them twice. I thought I was supposed to pick them up, and she thought she was supposed to. But there were 4 of them, so we were trying to figure out how to coordinate it all. besides working. So every once in a while we forgot them. But there were good coaches. They'd call us and say, "Hey, I got your kid."
Wow. So all of this is happening, and as time goes on, you want them to stay focused on education, though, and you're trying to help them to find their way in life as far as, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And how did you deal with that thought, and then particularly, I'm not sure about your other children, but particularly in Alicia's case, some of the research I did on her spoke about her having opportunities as a teenager, and she even mentioned, going to New York and so on. And so as her parents, from her being 2 years old, when you thought that she was gifted, and all of a sudden seeing that she's blossoming as a flower, knowing the lineage of arts in your family, did that scare you, or did you feel that this is just something that God wanted to happen this way?
I didn't know if that was God or not. Actually, I didn't know. And we had talked about it because she had an offer. Well, she went to American Ballet,
Summertime.
the summer camps.
SAB,
SAB ballet summer camps, when she was 12 and 13, I think, or 13 and 14. And that meant she had to leave us and go to New York and stay. But she was able to stay when she was 12 or 13 in the Lincoln Center. And therefore there was protection. But the next year she was out in the community. And
she stayed with a friend of ours. Then.
Right. And she was with, a friend who was with her. But this was very scary to me. And I had never thought of somebody going directly into ballet without actually finishing high school. We never thought about that. But our first offer came to go to Washington Ballet in St. Louis. And they gave her an offer, and she was to leave school and they would supervise her and she would be in school down there. But we felt that she was too young at that time. And then Nancy of Harlan then came later and said, we want to give her an offer. And she then had finished 11th grade, almost. She was in the middle then of 12th grade. She was there in the middle of 12th grade. And we thought about it. And one of the older ladies, who was in her 80s at that time, she had been in Ballet Russe, said, honey, this is a good offer. And they promised to educate her. So Dance Theater made arrangements with the Professional Children's School for her to finish her education. So she was given an offer, but she was also given an offer of education with it. So where she didn't finish at that time, the Professional Children's School in New York made arrangements with her school here for her to finish. She needed 1.5 units to graduate. And the Professional Children's School worked with her school here, Centennial High School, to help her meet that requirement so she could graduate from Centennial High School. And that was done via giving her private tutorials where they would give her an assignment, she'd take it with her, and then bring her work back and work with one tutor at the professional school.
Did you guys notice that your family the family environment started to change based on the fact that your children were getting older? Not maybe just Alicia, maybe some of the other children getting into the other activities now. Everybody's growing up. And so the dynamics of just taking them to dance school, it's different now.
Right.
Like you said, she had to go away, and so things are changing now, and you guys have to adapt to that change and hope that the disciplines that you instilled in her and the rest of your children stuck with them since, that they were away from home. How did you